Good morning. Thank you for joining us here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida for Space Shuttle Discovery's STS-133 L-2 countdown status briefing. Joining me today is Steve Payne, NASA Test Director.
Good morning.
And Kathy Winters, Shuttle Weather Officer.
Good morning.
We'll hear from our panelists and then take questions. Steve.
Thank you, Kendra. Well, I'm always happy to be here to give you status on the progress of our launch countdown. Much has happened since last time we spoke. Over the last few months, the team has been very busy effecting repairs to the external tank and making it stronger than ever. We've also resolved our problem with our hydrogen vent system leak and are now ready to fly again. Discovery is poised to lift off on Thursday afternoon, bound for the International Space Station to do what she does best. This will be her 39th and final flight. She's going to be carrying the permanent multipurpose module and the express logistics carrier to the International Space Station. With her visit to the station, she will join 5 other spacecraft from international partners, the HTV-2, the ATV-2, Progress, and Soyuz modules. This is what the ISS was meant to be, a truly international orbiting laboratory. Our launch countdown is proceeding smoothly and is on schedule. We're working only one minor issue. We have a slight internal leakage on a reaction control system regulator. However, we've seen this condition before. It is well within acceptable limits, and we're going to accept it for flight. It should be waved here shortly. Our call to stations took place yesterday at 2:30 p.m., and we have now completed checkout and configuration of our avionics systems. We've completed preparations for fuel cell reactant loading and have cleared our pad. We completed our pyrotechnic systems and range safety systems checks, and they were successful. And we're scheduled to begin purging the mid-body with inert gas shortly in preparation for the reactant loading, which should begin at around 12:30 this afternoon. We should be loading through about 6 p.m. tonight, at which point we'll reopen the pad and go into a 4-hour offload period where we'll take off approximately 120 pounds of liquid oxygen. We'll also begin initial ground systems preparations for external tank loading on Thursday morning. At 3 o'clock on Wednesday morning, we'll begin main engine power-up and avionics checkout, as well as checkout of the engine pneumatics and health monitoring systems. During the day, we'll begin removal of ground instrumentation and other miscellaneous equipment not required at the pad for launch. Our T-11 hold begins at 11 o'clock on Wednesday. During that time, we'll begin retracting access platforms, the engine support platforms, orbiter weather protection, conducting inspections of the external tank, and taking closeout photography. Checkout of the orbiter and ground communications network is planned for Wednesday afternoon at 2:30. Our final flight crew equipment stowage begins at 4 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon, where they install the mid-deck experiments and other perishable items. Our rotating service structure is scheduled to be retracted at 8 p.m. on Wednesday evening, at which point we'll begin our final crew module stowage for load and perform our ascent switch list, starting about 9:30, verifying all switch positions for launch. The countdown clock should resume its count at T-11 hours on Thursday morning at 25 minutes after midnight, at which point we'll begin our final loading preparations, activate fuel cells, and begin clearing the pad just after 2 o'clock in the morning on Thursday. We plan to begin tanking on Thursday morning at 7:25 a.m., and that should take about 3 hours to complete. Coincident with the end of our tanking, we have our ATV-2 docking, which should take place at about 10:45 in the morning, just after we send our final inspection teams and close our crews to the pad. If all is successful with ATV, we'll continue through a launch on Thursday. The flight crew will arrive at the pad for ingress at about 1:30 p.m. Our launch window is standard for an ISS mission. It's about 10 minutes long. We typically target the middle of the window. The window opens at 4:45 p.m., middle of the window sometime just after 4:50 p.m. We have Flight Day 3 opportunities on our first day, on Thursday. Every other day after that, every odd day on the calendar, is Flight Day 3 and Flight Day 4 opportunities. That would add about 3 minutes to our launch window should we choose to use those opportunities. We have available opportunities up to March 6th, at which point we run into a constraint with our dual docked operations with Soyuz. That may have some flexibility at it because we're considering an operation on orbit where we're going to go try to photograph all the vehicles out there at the same time, get a family picture and see some interesting imagery we've never seen at the space station before. So that constraint might be relaxed, and we may get another couple of days at the end of that if need be. We have some range constraints. There are two other rockets that are going to be launching in near to us. There's the Atlas V, which launches March 4th, and there's range reconfiguration the day prior for that and the day after. There's also Delta IV, which launches on March 11th, and it has range reconfiguration days on either side as well. So we would get our first three attempts fairly easy. We could work on the 27th if we needed it. We'd have to negotiate with our other rockets on the range if we needed additional days. We have 3 in a row available if we needed to for the 24th, 5th, and 6th, and then we'd have to work each other option as it came. We have no beta angle concerns until April 7th, so that's not an issue for us. We have ample pad hold time with 8 days of liquid hydrogen and 9 days of liquid oxygen available to us. Because we have the offload, we don't have the 48-hour turnaround with top-off. We can just do a standard 48-hour turnaround. It should be an 11-day plus 1 contingency day. Should we choose to take the opportunity to do the fly-around with the Soyuz vehicle, that would add a plus 1 day to the mission, and it would give us some constraints on our launch day because of that. Our end of mission is currently planned for KSC at about 12:44 Eastern on Monday, March 7th. At the moment, everything's going well with the countdown. I can tell you my own opinion, but we all take immense pride in the work and the accomplishments of the team and of this vehicle, and we're all looking forward to a successful launch on Thursday. That's it.
Thank you, Steve. Kathy?
Well, weather does look very favorable for the next few days coming up into launch. We do have a high-pressure ridge that's built in the upper levels over the Gulf of Mexico and Florida. With that, that's blocking a lot of the frontal boundaries that come in, and they just mainly stay to the north, and we may get the dry end of a front. For example, tomorrow, you won't really notice it too much. We'll get a dry frontal passage, and the winds will just shift around to the north. So overall, really no significant weather expected up through launch day. If we happen to delay a day or two, then we start getting concerned that one of the fronts will come into the area as that upper level ridge does break down some, and that could cause concern for showers within 20 nautical miles and a ceiling, a low cloud ceiling. 50% chance of KSC weather prohibiting launch, just a slight concern for a shower in the area or a low cloud ceiling. Looking at our satellite picture, you can see there is pleasant weather over Florida. We did have some fog this morning. That tends to happen when we get into this situation. But overall, the weather is good and is going to remain good all the way through all of our pre-launch processing and into launch day. And going into our tanking forecast then, for tanking, there's just a chance that we could get some isolated coastal showers in the morning due to, we'll be in a southeast flow. There'll be a high pressure ridge off to our northeast, putting us in a southeast flow, and sometimes we get some convergent bands off of the Bahamas when this occurs. That's not expected, though, to violate any constraints. We aren't expecting any lightning, so with that we have a 0% chance of KSC weather prohibiting tanking. Now, as we get to launch, those showers tend to dissipate in the afternoon as the air temperature warms up. And so with that, weather does look favorable for launch with just scattered skies, winds from the southeast, 14 peaking at 20 knots, a little bit gusty, but well within the constraints, going right up the runway also for RTLS there. Temperature around 73 degrees and just a 20% chance of KSC weather prohibiting launch. For SRB recovery, it's just going to be a little bit bumpy out there due to the winds being a little bit strong from the southeast, 12 gusting to 18 knots. So we do expect seas to be about 5 to 6 feet, but again, this is no constraint for SRB recovery. Space Flight Meteorology Group is forecasting some concerns at the abort landing sites in the U.S. We do have at Edwards Air Force Base winds expected to gust up to 30 knots. This is a head and tailwind constraint violation. Also a slight chance for showers within 30 nautical miles. For Northrop Field, there's also concern about some blowing dust, visibility coming down due to the wind kicking up some dust out there, but the winds are within constraints. And for our TAL weather forecast, we do have a good TAL site. We have a couple, actually, Zaragoza and Marone. We do have a concern. Space Flight Meteorology Group is forecasting winds being a bit gusty there at Istres, gusting up to 28 knots. And with that, that is a headwind constraint of 27 knots. If we happen to delay 24 hours, we start to become more concerned about showers in the area due to that front that's going to be moving into northern Florida. Still, overall, it's not too bad, but just additional concerns bumps our number up to a 30% chance of KSC weather prohibiting launch, primary concern being showers within 20 nautical miles of the Shuttle landing facility and a low cloud ceiling. The abort landing site's still having some bad weather out there. That's really expected to last into or the early portion of next week, as our long wave weather pattern pretty much stays the same till that time. And so with Edwards, again, winds gusting up to 29 knots. And this is, again, a headwind constraint and a tailwind constraint. Also for Northrop Field, we do, again, have visibility coming down due to the windy weather kicking up some sand and dust. And with that, we also have a crosswind constraint violation of 26 knots, so the crosswind would be 23-knot component. And for TAL sites, weather looks great on the second day at the TAL sites. All 3 TAL sites are forecast by Space Flight Meteorology Group to be go. If we happen to delay 48 hours, this is where the frontal boundary does move into the central Florida area, possibly passing just to our south. And if that occurs, it's really mainly passing through only at the surface. The fronts come in at a tilt, if you will, and so the entire front really isn't through our area yet. When this occurs, we tend to get low cloud ceilings. So our primary concern, if we happen to delay to Saturday, would be a ceiling at around 5,000 feet. And it would really depend on the thickness of the ceiling at that point on if that's a violation. And anything below 5,000 would also be an RTLS violation. We also are concerned just the chance of showers in the area as well. So with that, we did increase the probability on this day of KSC weather prohibiting launch to 40%. Space Flight Meteorology Group still forecasting pretty bad conditions out there at the abort landing sites out west, with a ceiling at Edwards at 4,000 feet, still wind concerns and still concerns for showers within 30 nautical miles, and again also at Northrop Field. Again, windy weather, violating constraints, and also the visibility coming down due to the sand and dust in the area. So overall, the first day for launch weather is I forgot to brief day 3 on the TAL sites. If we happen to delay 48 hours, we do have 2 good TAL sites, both at Zaragoza and Marone, with Istris just having a concern there due to a frontal boundary in the area of showers within 20 nautical miles. So overall, weather does look good on launch day, 20% chance of KSC weather prohibiting launch. If we happen to delay a day or 2, then we start to get more concerned about weather due to a frontal boundary coming into the area. And that's all I have.
Thank you. We'll now take questions. When the microphone comes your way, please state your name, affiliation, and to whom you're addressing your question. We'll start with Marcia.
Marcia Dunn, Associated Press for Steve. For the final inspection team, are you sending extra people out, doing anything extra because of the potential for cracks, even though you believe you've fixed all that problem?
We're sending the same size team. What they're doing differently is that they're going to specifically take pictures of our locks and LH2 flange area to make sure that we have good imagery of everything. We have a good, long, hard look at it, and we can send it back and have the team look at it before we go. We don't expect any problems. It's stronger than it was when it was new, but just in case.
And another question for you. You mentioned you might have some flexibility beyond March 6th, because of the Soyuz fly-around. Well, and I'm not sure I understand the relationship between those 2 events.
In the past, we have not really wanted to be flying other vehicles around when the shuttle was parked at the station, because there are some concerns about the plume impingement on the vehicle's windows. Because of the unique configuration we're in this time, the HTV vehicle is parked right in front of the window, so it's protecting it from any plume that the Soyuz might generate. So the plan they've come up with is very benign. It protects us from the concerns we had, and given that, we're not quite as concerned about launching with another vehicle up there that may be coming or going. So we have a little bit of flexibility where we normally wouldn't go. If we choose to do this, we may have a couple of days extra flexibility that we didn't have in the past. And it's because of the configuration we're in.
And in the back, please.
Stephen Young with spaceflightnow.com. For Steve, could you just go into a little more detail about the regulator issue you mentioned and why that can be waived?
We have a number of redundant systems in our reaction control system. We have a helium tank that pressurizes our propellant tanks. It is fed through 2 separate legs, each of which has redundant regulators that can adjust the pressure. One regulator on one leg has got a slight leak, which means that instead of shutting off completely like it should, a slight amount of helium is going into the propellant tank and adding a little more pressure in there than we typically would like. What we generally do is just shut off that leg. We isolate it, and it doesn't leak anymore, and we're okay. There are a number, if we had further issues, there are further actions we could take if we needed to. But in this case, we've seen it before. It's because of the way we test our equipment at the launch pad. We do one in the orbiter processing facility where it operates just like it does on orbit, and it passed with flying colors. It always does that. At the pad, because of the way we pressurize our tanks and we approach the lockup pressure very gently, it doesn't always seat all the way. As soon as we light them up, the pressure increases and it seals. So it's not a problem once we're on orbit. Typically what we'll do is we'll just open it back up just before launch, and we're fine. And we had that back in STS-116 with a larger leak rate, and we accepted it because we had a workaround that was good.
James.
James Dean from Florida Today. Steve, could those CONUS sites keep you grounded if they're no-go on weather?
No, the AOA sites, the abort once around sites, are deemed highly desirable but not mandatory. There are very few, very limited situations in which you would need them as mandatory, and they're generally for low inclination orbits. For a space station with very high inclination, it doesn't apply. So that one flight rule that could have possibly affected us does not apply in this case. So it's just highly desirable, but we have other alternatives.
Okay, thanks. And I was just wondering if you had any sense of the kind of crowds that we're going to see and the interest in this being the last flight we expect of one of the orbiters. It's pretty good prime time sort of launch timing. What do you think kind of is going to be the scene in the community, and as well, Kathy, I don't know if you could sort of give a sense of if things hold up the way they look now, kind of what the crowds will get to see in terms of clouds or whatever. Yeah.
I could tell you it's generated a lot of interest. The last few missions, people are starting to realize that they either see one now or they don't get to see one at all. So we've had some pretty good crowds come in the last couple of times. We expect an equally large crowd coming to see this one. There's been a lot of interest, a lot of people trying to come out. It ought to be a good show. It's a good time of day. It's an excellent vehicle, and it's always impressive to watch. So I'm sure we'll have a full house.
And weather-wise, maybe in the morning, if people come out early, you might see an isolated coastal shower, and then by the afternoon, those will start clearing up, and it'll be sort of one of those fair weather cumulus cloud type days. So it should be pretty sunny and pretty nice out there.
Are there any further questions? Denise.
Denise Chow at space.com. Just a clarification, actually. The regulator leak, was that found this morning at the pad?
No, that was found on Sunday night, Monday morning, when we did our pressurization for our helium tanks. There was a very slight leak at that point. We'd been watching it to see what it did, trying to isolate which one it was, and so we could shut down the appropriate leg. It just takes some time because it's very slight.
And also, what's the crew up to today?
Pardon?
What is the crew up to today?
I didn't look at the crew schedule. I'm not really sure at the moment, but we can get you that.
Are there any other questions? James?
Thanks again, James in Florida Today. Steve, it's been quite a while now since we had a launch, a couple attempts and tanking tests in between, but just wondered is there any sense of shaking off some rust among the launch teams, or is this just sort of feel like any other countdown?
Well, we have, because it's been a while, we've done a lot of extra training over the summer and over the winter months. We've added a lot of launch countdown simulations so that the team can exercise and keep their skills sharp. So that we took that into account. So, from what I've seen, everybody's on the ball. We have our tanking test we did. We have our November launch attempt. So people have been doing countdown or countdown-like activities for the last few months anyway. And the first thing we did when we came back after the New Year is go into a launch countdown simulation to make sure that everybody was up to speed. And we're pretty confident the team's ready.
And finally, I just wondered if you could speak a little bit to the significance of the mission in terms of the payloads that you're bringing up and the PMM, and just how that's going to help posture the station long term.
I don't have my payload guy here today, but he will be here tomorrow. In very broad terms, and since I'm not the payload person, the PMM is going to give us a whole lot more square footage out on station that we can use for storage and other needs as required. It's a good module that adds quite a bit of space, and the space is at a premium up there, so it's a good thing to have. The Express Logistics Carrier is going to take up some radiator panels that we will have for future need if we had to replace radiators. The place for the spares to be is up on station, so the really big stuff we need to take up while we can. So those are going to add to it, and it'll give them some storage space and others. Plus, there are a number of miscellaneous experiments that they're going to be taking up and down, bringing back, and some mid-deck experiments we're taking along the way. I would hope Scott will brief you tomorrow on all that with more detail. As far as the flight crew goes, I believe today they have their ingress procedure review, and they're doing their STA runs. They're going to be practicing their landings at the SLF. Okay.
Were there any other questions? That will conclude today's STS 133 L-2 countdown status briefing. Our next shuttle briefing will be tomorrow live on NASA television with the pre-launch news conference, which is 11 a.m. Eastern Time. For more information on the STS 133 mission and crew, visit www.nasa.gov/shuttle. Thank you.